At 84, Harrison Ford has stopped smoothing over the truth. After decades at the center of Hollywood power, he knows exactly which collaborations earned his respect and which ones did not. To the public, he is restraint and authority. On set, he measured professionalism, discipline, and trust. Some partners failed that test. Some choices crossed lines he never forgot. This is not a list of rumors or personality clashes. It is a reckoning from a man who built his career on control and reliability. We are counting down 5 people who strained that code. Each name exposes a different breach. The final one explains why Ford walked away convinced some creative battles are never worth fighting. Number 5, Josh Hartnett, the co-star who was not ready. To the public, Hollywood Homicide was a light buddy cop pairing built on contrast. To Harrison Ford, the contrast never settled into ease. Ford arrived in his 60s with decades of authority behind him. Josh Hartnett arrived in his mid-20s, newly famous, and still learning how to exist on a major studio set. What was meant to play as humor on screen felt strained almost immediately once the camera stopped. Accounts from the shoot described a distance that never closed. They worked together when scenes required it and separated the moment they cut. Conversations were brief. Eye contact was rare. The atmosphere stayed formal and guarded. Media coverage amplified it. Rumors spread that Ford had dismissed Hartnett as a punk and that Hartnett had mocked Ford in return during promotion. Whether those exact words were ever spoken mattered less than the fact that they fit what observers already sensed. The imbalance of experience shaped everything. Hartnett later admitted he was overwhelmed. He had grown up watching Ford and remembered seeing Return of the Jedi with his father as a child. That admiration turned into pressure once filming began. Instead of relaxing into the work, he focused on not getting in the way. The tension showed. To Ford, it read as hesitation. To Hartnett, it felt like being measured constantly. Production issues made it worse. The script changed during filming, creating disagreements about tone and direction. There were no long discussions to clear the air. There was silence. Hartnett later recalled sitting in a car between takes for nearly an hour without a word exchanged. No notes, no jokes, just waiting. That image became the lasting symbol of their working relationship. With time, Hartnett softened his version of events. He said the media inflated a limited situation. During the press tour, he once called Ford the bane of his existence, then later clarified it was half joking. He described Ford's teasing as a way of asserting control with younger actors rather than a personal attack. Ford's own comments kept the story alive. He joked publicly about how easily Hartnett could be thrown off balance and seemed amused by it. Spoken lightly, those remarks reinforced the sense of hierarchy. To the audience, it sounded like proof that the tension was real. Nothing ever exploded. There was no final argument. The consequence was quieter. A set defined by distance. A pairing remembered less for chemistry than for silence. If one collaboration stalled in quiet discomfort, the next shows what happens when 2 stars push in opposite directions. Number 4, Brad Pitt, the partner who fought for control. To the public, the Devil's Own paired 2 stars at different stages of power. To Harrison Ford, the partnership never settled into trust. He later described the relationship with Brad Pitt using a single word: complicated. It was not an insult. It was an admission that the set was under strain from the beginning. The tension started before filming. Pitt had helped shape the original script and entered with a clear sense of direction. When Ford joined, he paused, watching how the story would land and where authority would sit. They disagreed on creative leadership. Even the choice of director became a fault line. Alan J. Pakula was Ford's choice. Pitt had never worked with him. That difference created unease before a scene was shot. Once production began, the balance grew sharper. Pitt's character arrived with depth and interior conflict. Ford wanted his role to carry equal weight. He pushed for a subplot that explored the aftermath of a shooting involving his partner. A writer was brought in to add it. The problem was timing. Rewrites continued mid-shoot. The 2 actors often worked from different versions of the script. Decisions felt provisional. Authority felt split. Ford later admitted he pushed too hard. He acknowledged that Pitt had every right to protect his work. Pitt did the same from his side. Neither backed down. The result was pressure without resolution. Ford returned to the same word when asked about it. Complicated, not personal, just unresolved. Pitt's account echoed the strain. He described the early days as chaotic, driven by the absence of a finished script. He later called the experience irresponsible, then softened the remark. The uncertainty forced improvisation where clarity was needed most. Under those conditions, disagreement became inevitable. There was no public hostility. Ford praised Pitt's talent. Pitt called Ford a hero and an influence. audience. The conflict was not about respect, it was about control. Two professionals trying to steer the same project while the ground shifted beneath them. The consequence was subtle, but lasting. A collaboration remembered less for connection than for tension. A film shaped as much by compromise as by intent. Clashing visions strain a set. Losing a role can harden resentment. Next is an actor who carried that loss for years. Number 3, Alec Baldwin, a grievance carried for years. To the public, Harrison Ford stepping into the Jack Ryan role looked like a routine casting change. To Alec Baldwin, it became a defining wound. The tension between them does not come from rumor. It comes directly from Baldwin's own memoir, where he describes the moment he realized the role he expected to keep was gone. Baldwin played Jack Ryan in The Hunt for Red October and believed he would continue in the sequel, Patriot Games. According to Baldwin, director John McTiernan told him Paramount was still negotiating with him. When McTiernan later asked Ford if he was aware of that, Baldwin claims Ford replied with a single sentence: "Fuck him." Baldwin repeats the quote without embellishment. For him, it explained everything. Losing the role was only part of the damage. Baldwin believed he had been quietly replaced by someone with greater leverage. In his telling, Paramount owed Ford money from an earlier project and used the franchise to settle accounts. Whether that explanation is fully accurate has been disputed, but Baldwin felt blindsided. Jack Ryan became permanently associated with Ford, and Baldwin saw that shift as a real blow to his momentum at a crucial point in his career. Years later, Baldwin described seeing Ford at a charity event. His description was cutting and deliberate. He called Ford a little man, short, scrawny, and wiry, whose soft voice sounds as if it's coming from behind a door. The image was meant to strip away Ford's public authority. It carried Baldwin's bitterness without restraint. Not everyone accepts Baldwin's version. Studio insiders have pointed to scheduling conflicts and contract negotiations as major factors in the casting change. Baldwin rejects those explanations. His memoir leaves no doubt about how deeply the moment affected him and how firmly he assigns blame. From Baldwin's perspective, the issue was not rivalry, it was indifference. He frames Ford as dismissive, someone who stepped into the role without regard for who was displaced. Ford never responded publicly and moved on without comment. Baldwin did not. The consequence was uneven. Ford gained a franchise and left the moment behind. Baldwin carried the grievance for years and etched it into print. One role changed hands. The resentment stayed. Losing a role can linger. Revealing a private past can cut even deeper. Next is the choice that exposed something Ford wanted left buried. Number 2, Carrie Fisher. The past Ford wanted sealed. To the public, Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher were defined by chemistry and wit on screen. To Ford, the history behind that image belonged to a private time he never intended to revisit. That changed when Fisher chose to publish her memories. In her memoir, The Princess Diarist, Fisher revealed that she and Ford had a real-life romantic relationship while filming Star Wars in the late 1970s. She did not summarize it from memory alone. She returned to diary entries she had written as a 19-year-old during production and shared them decades later. The decision shifted a long-sealed chapter into public view. Fisher said she called Ford to warn him before publication. His response was brief. He raised a finger and said, "Lawyer?" The reaction became public and spoke for itself. It made clear that Ford was uncomfortable with his private life being open to scrutiny. Fisher said she offered to let him review the material and remove anything he did not want included. She sent pages. She never heard back. Ford's discomfort followed a pattern. He has always guarded his personal life and avoids discussing it publicly. When asked about the memoir later, he declined to engage. He said he did not want to talk about it and would not say whether he wished it had never been written. When asked if he had read it, he said he had not. The answer sounded less like denial and more like distance. The tension was not only about exposure, the context mattered. At the time of the relationship, Ford was married with children. Fisher was very young. In later interviews, she described the experience as intense and formative. She spoke warmly about his kindness, but also acknowledged that her feelings were deeper than his. On screen, their connection became iconic. Off camera, the imbalance was real. When the book was released, public reaction was immediate. Fans were surprised by the honesty. What lingered was Ford's response. He did not retaliate. He did not argue his side. He set a boundary by refusing to discuss it. The silence became his position. The consequence was lasting discomfort. Fisher reclaimed her past in her own words. Ford absorbed the attention without comment and withdrew further from the conversation. Two people remembered the same moment very differently and only one chose to publish it. Private history becoming public can strain any relationship, creative conflict can do the same. Next is the director whose vision left Ford openly frustrated. Number 1. Ridley Scott, the vision that overruled The Voice. To the public, Blade Runner became a landmark of modern cinema. To Harrison Ford, the experience behind it was defined by frustration. The collaboration with Ridley Scott produced an iconic film, but it did not produce harmony. Ford has said repeatedly that much of his distance from the film comes from how it was made, not from what it became. Ford never concealed his feelings. He described Blade Runner as not one of his favorite films and traced that reaction to the production itself. He clashed with Scott over tone, control, and authorship. What stayed with him most was not the elaborate sets or the long night shoots, but the voiceover narration added after filming. The studio insisted on it, believing audiences would struggle without explanation. Ford disagreed. He felt it betrayed the film's intent and undercut the ambiguity Scott had built. Recording it, he later said, was a nightmare. Those sessions became the breaking point. Ford was handed narration written by people he barely knew and instructed to read it without discussion. He complied because his contract required it, not because he believed in the material. He delivered the lines flatly, later admitting he did not want them to work. He argued against the narration from the start, believing the story should be understood through observation rather than instruction. Being pulled back into the project after he thought it was finished left him irritated and disengaged. Scott's account complicates the picture. He has said Ford was difficult on set and once called him the biggest pain he had ever worked with, before later softening the remark. At the time, Scott was still establishing himself and pushing a dense visual vision. Managing that ambition alongside a major star created strain. Authority was contested, and neither side felt fully heard. Their disagreement centered on the character of Deckard. Ford wanted a decisive detective with agency and clarity. Scott wanted ambiguity, atmosphere, and restraint. These were not small creative differences. They shaped how scenes were played, how motivations were framed, and how the story resolved. Each believed his approach served the film best. Ford's dissatisfaction lingered. He consistently favored versions of the film without the narration, and has made that preference clear for decades. He has praised Scott's career broadly, but Blade Runner remained a sore point. Over time, the hostility cooled into mutual respect, but the experience never lost its edge for Ford. The film endured. The tension did too. Blade Runner became a classic, but for its lead actor, it also marked a collaboration where vision outweighed voice.